FORA.tv. The world is thinking.
When I went back and looked at some of the research, there's always been this association about being frugal means cheap. How big a bag of rice can I buy for how little money? And how many rice dishes can I come up for my kids, right? It's always had that kind of connotation. And I think this is the difference, that frugality has nothing to do with cheapness. Nobody wants to live their life being cheap. No one wants on their tombstone, I was a cheapskate. That's not something that we want to hear. But frugality is the opposite of being a cheapskate. It's about being very conscious of the impact of your spending. It's about very conscious about what you're doing with your money. And this is where another trend that's also been going on over time hits in with the impact of the Great Recession. And that is this thing called sustainability, which means many things to different people. But it's concern for the environment. It's concern for what is your impact in your local community, global climate change, local businesses, local farmers. It's a very broad-based term, and it's moved from the tributaries of society to the mainstream. And I know there's a lot of greenwash and there's hypocrisy and we're taking stumbling steps, but basically business, government, college, university, you cannot walk on a campus today without sustainability being one of the main themes that's going on. And so sustainability has moved into the mainstream. And this is what's going to change how we think about being frugal and why being frugal has nothing about being cheap. Because it has to do with thinking about how our spending has an impact on the planet, how it has an impact on our community. So one of the things is, if you look at borrowing is an incredibly optimistic act, as I said. You really do believe that the future is going to be better. And in doing the research for this, I had some conversations with my mother, and I learned some stories that I hadn't known. I knew that my parents had moved to Levittown in 1949, so they were one of the pioneers, one of the first ones to go to Levittown. But what I didn't know is that my dad's dad got furious at my father for buying a home. He thought that he had condemned his family to financial ruin. Now, my grandfather in the 1920s had bought a home, and he worked in Yonkers, New York, in the Irish section, and he worked in Anaconda Copper. And during the Great Depression, there were 60 in his department, and there ended up being 2. And he lost his home to foreclosure. And so this extended Irish Catholic family moved from a house to a 2-bedroom apartment. And so that, he felt, my father was doing to his family. But my father, like most of his generation, were incredibly optimistic. I mean, it's really something to think that they borrowed 30-year mortgages at that time, 1949, 1950, and they basically believed that the world was going to be a better place. And so when we look at sustainability, it's an incredibly optimistic act. We really believe that thinking about the impact that we're having on the environment, that being concerned about local businesses, that trying to support our community and our neighborhood and being involved in our community, that this is going to make a difference. And so we don't know what's going to happen in terms of UN treaties and global climate change and whether we're going to go to cap and trade or we're going to have a carbon tax and all this stuff that's being debated up there. But in everyday activities, people really believe that they're going to make a difference. And it's that makes frugality different than in the past, that there are these optimistic acts. And what we learned during the Great Recession is that being frugal and being green reinforce one another. And so I think this is why it is a new frugality. It used to, I would roll my eyes. My dad would, my brother Tony is here, and I'm sure you remember this, he would always, every night his job was to unplug all the appliances. I mean, and my mom would go, we were green before anyone knew what being green was. Now, they did that to save money, because electricity was expensive. We didn't have a lot of money. So that's one way to save some money. Today, we do that not because, partly to save money, but partially because, we're thinking, well, we want to have less of an imprint. We want to conserve energy. We grew up in hand-me-downs, completely. My grandmother, she was a seamstress, International Garment Workers Union. Every Christmas, That was our holiday gift. They're great pajamas. That's what we use for the year. So a lot of these things that were done in an earlier generation in order to save money have now become something that we do to save money, but also because we think it's a good thing to do and we think it's important to do. And so being frugal and being green will reinforce one another. And that's one of the real dramatic changes that's happening in our economy today.